So, I mean, what does dating even look like now? I mean, I know, Jen, you're not about that life at the moment. I mean, in your 40s now, or is it? I had a terrible experience with dating apps. I don't know about you guys. If I were single, I do not think I would be on any. Not that I see the value in them. I think they were kind of abused, right? So I mean, you think of
Yeah.
Tinder now, and you think of hookups, but I definitely see the value in it. I've got best friends that met their spouses on dating apps and got married, and
Yeah.
are expecting children. So
Well, and I guess the only thing I could speak to that is that I don't see a massive difference between the real world and dating apps, only in terms of the context, the number of people you can meet. Because if meeting people in the real world was, so great, right? Then the average divorce rate would be lower. The number of people who are in happy relationships would be much lower. Meeting people is meeting people, right? So whether you meet their mask for a certain number of time, amount of time, or you don't, I think what I've realized is that I think, at least from my point of view, the commonality is how well can we create our criterias and how well are those criterias mapped to who we are. So again, like when our previous conversation, Brian, I was talking about how too few of us in any realm of our life ever think about what's the criteria. So I like this. Okay. Why? Because it's good. Okay. Well, why do you think it's good? And really going through the motions of saying to yourself, like again, in terms of meeting, I'll just use women, but meeting men, a lot of, because I have a lot of, female friends and we talk all the time about dating. And this is kind of the common conversation of like, well, I met this guy and he's really cute and, he was funny and he was nice. And, I think we hit it off. And, but then the actions that this guy takes maybe subsequently are not positive. And retroactively, we make all these excuses and go, well, he probably just had a bad day, or, oh, he probably did this, or, oh, oh, well, what did you like about him? Well, he's really cute. He's funny. He's this. Okay, well, what does cute mean? What does funny mean? Like, what's the definitions of them? And how do you know you really found them? Because are you finding the mask qualities, or are you finding the true person and how they view them?
let me ask you this though: can't that work against you, especially with dating apps? I mean, and I'll give you an example. Girl doesn't like black guys. She sees my picture. It takes her, a millisecond to swipe right or left or whatever,
Uh,
whichever way you're supposed to swipe. You know what I mean?
yeah.
And I think that criteria could sometimes, make people.
Well,
Uh,
how about this? Say for that particular point, the criteria isn't if she swiped. The criteria is if you would want a person who swiped. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, would you want the kind of person who wasn't willing to be open-minded enough to look at someone's skin color, right? Like, that's the real criteria,
never thought of it that
because it's no different that, let's say if I say I want someone, the example I gave last time was funny. Like, well, what does funny mean? Does someone come up with funny ideas? Do they say funny things? Do they make dumb moves that you laugh at and go, they're funny? The criteria is different, right? So if I say I want someone who's smart, yeah, that's super vague. Like, what does that mean? If I'm a logical person like Jen, do I want someone who's smart enough to recognize when I need logical support, when maybe things are a little bit crazy and I need a problem solver? That could
Mhm.
be super smart. And maybe they're not smart in any other aspect of their life,
way.
but
Right.
that's good enough. So, what's the criteria, right? And like, if I say I want someone who's kind or loves animals, what am I really saying, right? Do I just want someone who will pet our dog, or do I want someone who will enjoy going to the dog park with me and pet everyone's dog?
Or
You know what I mean?
someone
Like,
who pets every
yeah,
every.
it's so much more, it's so much deeper than we actually see in the moment, because we actually do want things to fit. If I meet someone and I'm attracted to them, like, I want to believe they're smart and they're funny and they're kind, they're everything. But the only way that I'll know is to say, okay, what do I want? And then how do I define that want? And then what's the proof or validation of that want? So if I say I want smart, I want someone to say funny or say smart things. I want them to be knowledgeable. Okay, how will I know? Well, they quote this and this and this and this all the time, or they talk about this, or they study this. So now I have a want, I have my definition for it, and I have the backup facts of like what I've seen them do, versus just saying, yeah, they're that.
Right. That's interesting.
I mean, I don't have personal experience with that. I do have two girlfriends that are very active in the dating world and they're on a lot of dating apps. So, Brian, my girlfriend Kaylin, I think she lives in San Diego. She has since found someone, but so they're both of their struggles were, I don't think that, and they've, been on several dates, they're open-minded, they're beautiful, they're accomplished, there's really like no reason. And they found that the guys were just never serious about it. And again, that could be a generalization, but that's something that I've heard, which would likely deter me personally if I were if I were in a position that I wanted to date. I agree with what you're saying, Brian. And maybe that's me being closed-minded. I'm not really sure, but in a lot of ways, I'd like to be like, I ain't got time for any of that. Okay. I'm 40 years old. I'm grown. I don't, I mean, you wish that there was a way to cultivate a genuine connection, even if it was just for the sake of meeting people, right? It's just hard to really know. I mean, and again, that requires putting yourself out there. But I do, like I said, I have, two great examples of girls that, like I said, there's seemingly no reason why none of the matches, worked out. They met all the things on the boxes and everything like that. And then like in real life, it was just kind of like,
Yeah. Well, I guess to address that, I definitely don't think you're closed-minded. I definitely don't think your friends are not worthy of those boxes in both ways. I think this is a different conversation. And I think this is a conversation about this like vicious cycle that we're all in. So let's say in Brian's point, I'm a great guy, smart, a great partner, but I just get swiped because I don't like this. Or if I'm a guy and I'm in San Diego and I meet hundreds of beautiful girls, and some of them, to be fair, I might hook up with the same night. I might be able to not call and they'll still call me. So then I get reinforced the action that, oh, like I can do that. And then when I meet someone who's actually great, I'm not thinking about how great they are. I'm just thinking, well, how quick can I hook up with this girl? If not, okay, I'll move on to the next girl. And there's so many options. But then now the difference is if I'm that girl and I go, well, I really like this guy and I hooked up with him because he was cute, but I liked him. Now I go, well, the next guy, maybe I won't, or the next guy, maybe I will even faster because I believe that maybe I did something wrong. And women will tend to blame themselves and men will tend to be opportunistic. So then now we're in this cycle of like, well, how fast, how much, how easy, how many options, how many this, like, so I think it's almost a different conversation in terms of like ecosystem, like in terms of good
or
guys.
ecosystem.
Yeah. Yeah. And a great word for it, right? Because it becomes like, I've been on tons of dates and I for sure know that girls that I met didn't see my value, right? They just saw like, well, I want someone that's going to take me out and have fun and spend money on me and we're going to have this great time. Okay. I could do that. But if I did that, then I'm treating you in a very different way because now I'm looking at you very differently. If I'm going to take you serious, then I want you to take me serious. So now if there's any fracture in those two, then what happens? Then either I think something or you think something. So if you're not getting what you want, because if you're a girl, so you want fun, and I'm a guy, I'm like, I want to be serious, or vice versa. I'm a guy that's like, hey, I just want to have fun, and your girl wants to be serious, and we're not really helping each other understand that bigger ecosystem. Then it's like this cycle. At least from what I see, I think it's an ecosystem problem, right? Where we're not even thinking about our criteria. We're just acting on our wants in the moment.
Well, and I think that women see, and I hate to make this, I don't want to make like sweeping generalizations because that's not fair, but I will say from a female's perspective that I feel like the women that I know go into it with a different mindset. They don't go into it with a mindset, especially at our age. The women I'm speaking of are my age or just a tiny bit younger. And, they go into it looking for a certain thing. And their expectation is that because someone's on the site, that they're also looking for the same thing. And again, it's tough to not have expectations. I think we have them in every area of life. We have a certain expectation of how our friends treat us or our colleagues treat us, or, so like I said, the dating site thing is no different. You think to yourself, oh, like, well, if they're signed up on this and maybe they're paying for it, like it's not like a plenty of fish type of situation or something like that, that they're looking for the same thing that I'm looking for.
Yeah.
They filled out all the things, they're doing all the things, and I'm doing the things. So
yeah. And
I don't
unfortunately,
know.
I think that's just it's hard because I think people's intentions maybe aren't always as clear.
So sorry, guys.
You're all
It's
good.
okay.
It happens in real life too.
Sorry, I totally yeah. I'm sorry, say that again.
No, I'm just saying that, I think the unfortunate part is that even if someone goes on a site and they're paying for it and they're trying to do the right thing, our intentions are always not the same. So don't get me wrong, we should all have expectations. My only caveat to that is saying we should have a criteria based on those expectations. We should know what the expectation is and how to define it. Now, the next thing is, okay, if we go into this world or this ecosystem, we have to know there are going to be a lot of people in that ecosystem who are not playing the same game we are, right? Because for one, they don't have maybe either a fair expectation or even a well-defined one. And if they do, they haven't gone down the route of actually thinking what it actually is, what they actually want. And then there's some people who have no expectation. They just want to have fun. And they're just trying to have like, I just want to feel something. They're not thinking about it like a real
That's
thing.
totally valid. Yeah, I guess it just depends on like where you're at. But to speak to your point, Brian, originally, for me, like my gut reaction would be to totally tap out on something like that and forego even creating relationships just because my time is so precious. And I can only speak, for my particular situation, but my time is so precious that it would take like currently an act of God for, me to even be interested. And it's not that I'm not a human being. Of course, like I want connection and, I think about the same things that everybody else does. It's just that my commitment to my child is above anything that I would want to think or feel personally. You know what I mean?
For sure. I think one thing that's always been a challenge with me is like dating apps are a great tool for someone like myself who I would never approach somebody. I could be absolutely in love with you and need to speak with you and you would never know. You know what I mean? So it's obviously a lot easier, that barrier to entry, when you're hiding behind your phone. Without that, I imagine, it would just be impossible for me to meet people. And that's a me challenge, but that's one of the reasons why, I see the value in dating apps for sure.
Well, and I think that's why, to my point, where it's sometimes going into it with a different mindset of like, well, I'm not going into it and thinking that I'm going to meet, my perfect partner. Maybe I'm just going to find a quality, and that's how I had to start looking at it. It's like, well, maybe this date that I'm going to go on is just for me to find out one piece of information, and that's how I can value it. Where it wasn't
that's
like, well,
totally good.
I'm going to meet someone and they're going to be the perfect person. Because you couldn't create it anyway, even if you wanted to. It's just, but if I can get closer to either discovering something or learning something or improving myself in some way, then, to spend the money on the date and take the time and all, to me, it had value. And it's only because I like the idea of continuing to learn and think about where I can provide value to a partner and what I'm actually looking for in my partner. But Jen, again, your situation, I think, is one that's so common. And a lot of people I talk to, it's like this idea of, well, look, like I'm just not in that place. And there's nothing wrong with that. Nothing at all. And it's completely normal. But it still comes back to like, okay, figuring out what you want. Like, so at this moment, hey, my daughter's number one. Absolutely. But you being number two and a high valued number two still has a lot of value. Right. And the better number two you can be, the better you can make the number one. Right. And so then it becomes the thinking about the balancing of how much you and how much them and how much the combination of that together really makes the best situation.
The funny thing is my daughter is probably more of a romantic than I am. She's, I don't know, to speak to your point, I totally agree with what you're saying. It's just for me hard, obviously, to conceptualize how that would even fit, into my life. But I agree. I think, and if I were in your situation, I would be doing the same thing. And the fact that you're able to look at it that way, from a growth perspective, how you can improve and what are you really looking for and narrow those things down is a great thing. I mean, before we started the conversation, I had a feeling Brian was going to do the relationship questions. So something popped up on my feed and it said, one person's you require too much is someone else's. Is that all you need? Don't settle. Right. And I thought that was pretty beautiful because again, it goes back to, I guess, emotional maturity, thinking about criteria. What do you need and want in your life? And then, realizing that you don't have to settle. You can keep looking and use those platforms for, I guess, their intended purpose, which is to, grow your network. And eventually, like you said, it's not like it's something you could plan anyway. I mean, you could go on a million dates and still not even find one person that you even think has, sense or whatever it is that you're looking for. But
Well, and again, that's true whether you meet someone through a friend, whether you meet someone just, out in the world or on a dating app. It's still the same thing. How many people have we all met through friends or contacts or whatever? And they were nice and everything was fine, but it wasn't anything different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love the term emotional maturity. I think that's so important. I think that's why dating is different, now than it was 20 years ago, because we're that much more mature. I've been fortunate enough to have experience in a not so good relationship versus, my current relationship now. So all the things that we're touching upon, I mean, it's just so important, right? Just making sure, one of the things, Adam, that you mentioned was being a problem solver. Like those are things that most people don't think about. But how important is it when you're looking for a partner that you're with someone that can, you know, solve problems, for example? But that's just one example of the
Yeah.
things and the criteria that I'll speak for guys in my experience, they just don't consider.
Yeah. Well, no, and again, to be fair, right? Like nothing I will ever say or intend to say is about man versus woman. I think we all, like men and women, need to help each other, and we need to help each other understand our different thinkings and how we can help solve these bigger problems. Because a lot of what men don't know about women is these questions we're talking about, or how to actually even think about them or approach them in certain moments, and vice versa. But it's because I think human nature is that we're always reactive. Like we don't think about problem solving because there's no problem at hand until there becomes a problem. Then we go, oh, I need a problem solver. And
Right.
yet, yeah, like at that moment, but that's hard to see when you're first dating someone or first meeting someone. It's hard to see, is that person a problem solver? So then how would you actually see that? The only thing I can think of is let's figure out a way to put them in a problem, right? Like, I mean, even though that feels unfair, like I said, one of the criteria things I said to my ex was like, look, like cancel on a guy on the first date, see how he reacts. Is he mad? Is he upset? Does he not call you back right away? Does he change his behavior? Might be an indicator. I'm not saying it would be 100%. Or if you go, hey, like maybe on a date, you're going to speak about a problem and see how he responds. Does he go, wow, that sucks? Or does he go, wow, tell me more? Like how do you, and he's trying to actively solve it. That would be an indicator. So how would we know anything? How do we know a job is great? How do we know an investment's great? Like we think about it, we weigh the options, then we look at the signs and we make determinations. I mean, we do the same thing in every aspect of life, but relationships, we just don't do it as much because we tend to lean with feeling. Like I feel this, she's hot, he's good, and we don't think about what we actually mean and how to really see through, I guess, the proverbial mask.
There's that, and then there's also what we talked about is just the, once you have those guidelines in place, it's having the accountability to yourself to be able to follow through, right? Like,
That's so true.
like we
Yeah.
all know better, we all know what we should
Yeah.
have, what we should
Yeah.
do, but it's hard when you have feelings involved and you like someone, and
So that's an interesting kind of segue, right? Like, I mean, like maybe for all of us, what are some of the common things like that we go, oof, we knew that was a bad thing, but yet we were like, it's fine.
For
Yeah.
me personally, I was always convinced that things would get better, right? So,
Mhm.
if I'm talking to Jen and my girlfriend sees it and that ends up being a week-long fight, I just kind of assume she'll meet Jen, she'll like her, she'll understand that we're friends. So I think I always made excuses for poor behavior and for criteria that I did not like, in hopes that I could change it, that I could fix it.
Mhm. Mhm.
So so jealousy particularly.
I mean, there was a ton.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a ton. I mean, just the ability to sit and have a conversation about anything, without it becoming a fight. Or when you do fight, it's knowing how to fight, right? And
Sure.
that's something that I'm still honestly working on. But it's, do you get mad and shut down for 2 weeks? Are you able to sit down and have a mature conversation about it and move on? Yeah, there's tons of things. I can go on for days.
Jen, anything for you?
Yeah, for sure. So, for me, I think that kind of to speak to Brian's point, when I was younger, it was so much easier for me to make a distinction. Like these are my deal breakers, right? And at a very young age, I knew like what I was willing to tolerate and what I wasn't. And let's just call it 6 months or a year or something like that. And you let things kind of play out and unfold. But once you see who someone is, then you can confidently say, I'm good. Thanks. This has been real. This has been fun. It hasn't been real fun. We'll just, separate ways or whatever you want to say. What I will say is that I think, again, going back to just being naive about people's standards is you think that there are certain momentous occasions that are just they're just standards. And again, I mean, like, it sounds so silly when you say it out loud. You're like, okay, standards, yeah, everybody has them. Not everybody has them. So
Yeah.
like the birth of a child, or the loss of a parent, or an illness, or those kinds of things, when you experience those things with another person, it really shows you who they are. And I can say with confidence that, like, if something like that were to happen, and they acted any way but what you need, which would be support, or whatever it is that you think that you need, just run. You know what I mean? Like, those things are not going to change. That's innately in them. And if they don't have that human compassion and empathy to work through those situations, then it's probably never going to change. So
Yeah.
agreeing with what Brian's saying, sometimes you think, oh, naturally when these things happen, this person is going to act like XYZ, because that's how I would act, right?
Yeah.
I would be, compassionate, or whatever the thing is that you would do. But it's just, yeah, you can't take those things for granted. It's just not the same for
Yeah.
everybody.
And I love that point. And I think one of the hard parts is that one of the missions that I'm trying to be on is this idea of these things that we've all learned, these experiences we've all had. It's one thing for us to say them and people to hear them, but then now the next question is always going to be, okay, but like, how do I discover that? Like, how do I know that this person, if we have a kid or someone died, like, how would I know? And we can put some pieces together, but obviously we don't want to be in a situation where it happens and then we have to find out. We want to try to proactively find out. So like, to me, one of the biggest things is how do you solve that problem? Like, how do you solve the problem of what could I do proactively that would help me see that this person is the kind of person who's super jealous, and no matter who I'm talking to, they're gonna get mad, or this person won't support me, when someone dies.
Well, don't you think though, Brian, early on, and I mean, truly, if you're very honest with yourself, I think, and that there are signs in the very beginning that indicate to you the kind of person that someone is. So meaning, like, how do they treat the waitress? Right? Were they short-tempered with the waitress? Did they offer them a good tip? Did they complain about having to offer a tip? How many friends do they have? There's a saying, a friend to everyone is a friend to no one, right? And I mean, maybe that's a little extreme, but do they have friends? Do they have a core group of five? These are, I mean, I'm saying this as much to myself as anyone else. It's definitely a rhetorical, question, but I think that if we're very honest with ourselves, number one, it can be very uncomfortable to ask hard questions, right? Until you're at a certain point in a relationship. Number two, if you're very honest, there's subtle indications all along the way, how they treat you, how they respond to you, how they respond to their environment, their work environment. Do they come home complaining every day? Do they, brain dump every day without realizing it? And there are some things that you can totally work with people on, and there are others that you can say to yourself, hey, you know what, if I could see into the future, this probably isn't going to be a good thing. And I wish I would have done that. You know what I mean? But like Brian said, you just make excuses for people. You try to kind of, you want it to fit into a narrative sometimes, I think.
Yeah.
And on top of excuses, I think one of the biggest challenges that, maybe you find out these things too late, right? I mean,
Yeah, true.
if Jen, if you're dating somebody, you probably don't want them to meet your daughter right away, right?
Yeah.
So let's say you wait 6 months, and then, your relationship's great, but the two of them just hate each other. Right? Now you've already invested 6 months in this relationship. You've got the emotional attachment. I think it makes it that much harder to walk away or to run away, as you said. And then you try and fix it, because you don't want
True.
to give up the last 6 months that you just committed.
Yeah. But you know what? I think this exactly speaks to the point that I was earlier trying to make right now, is that, like, there pretty much is no way to know these things, right? There's no 100% way. The only thing that we can get close to is the approximation of those things. So like I said, if, like, to Jen's point, like, if how did that person treat a waiter? There's no doubt that that's an indicator of something. There's just no doubt, right? Like,
Right.
there's no doubt that, when a person, if you cancel on a date and the way they respond, or if you bring up a hard topic, the way that they answer, I mean, there's no perfect way, but there's no closer answer than approximation. So you go to school, your teacher, professor is teaching you something. They're not giving you the exact question on the test, but they give you something very similar, right? And they
Yeah.
change this around, but that's the test. That's what you're going to be graded on. But the lesson that you learned in the lectures was similar enough for you to go, oh, that's right. When they said this is what happened. And then it led to this. So now when I see that on the test, I go, like, do I know this or do I not?
Mhm.
There's no one's going to give us no one's going to tell you like, yeah, my last 7 funerals, I just walked away. Like, no one's going to do that. No one's going to say the last 7 guys, like, yeah, I still have their passwords. Like, no one's going to tell you that. So the only thing is approximation. And I think that's why it's so important for me to be able to come up with some answer to say to the 21-year-old version of me or 25-year-old version of me and say, this is how you would actually do it. Because we can all share the experience and they could feel that emotion and go, wow, like, I don't want to go through that. But then
Mhm.
what is their step? What's their answer? What do they actually do? And the only thing I can come up with is you create a situation or you ask a question, or you do something that gives you an approximation.
You know what's interesting about that? I can honestly say on the flip side, I went through it. There were certain, I don't know what you want to call them, life-changing events or whatever. And I think that's what actually made me decide to go ring shopping and propose and settle down.
Yeah.
Um, at one point, my wife's mother passed away, unfortunately, so we had to go through that. She had my wife had a surgery once, and this is when we were dating. And I ended up posting up at her house and hanging out with her for literally a week, taking a couple days off, and we just had so much fun. And you kind of realize, like, those are the things that I think make a big impact on whether you're going to move forward or run the other direction.
Also, I think for me, one of the things I want to do for my daughter is like make a list of personal proverbs. And as cliche as they may sound, I go back to them myself, like over and over again in my brain. And like one of the ones, is, when people show you who they are, believe them, right?
Yeah.
I mean, because the human part of you wants to be like, no, you can't be that cruel or cold. Yeah, like, I mean, that's the thing, is it hurts you on an ego level, right? Like, you want to be chosen, you want somebody to show up for you, right? Or whatever your, the thing is. But ultimately, it's one of those things, is trying to just, I guess, to speak to your point, like if you were doing research for a book, is that, trusting your gut. When you break small promises to yourself, that's how you don't trust yourself. So make small promises to yourself, keep those promises to yourself, believe, if you have a gut feeling about somebody, it's, you're usually right.
Yeah.
Those are really simple things, but they're just true.
Yeah. Oh, I love the proverb thing too, because I think those things do stick in our heads, right? That, we memorize certain phrases or, themes. And if we're in those moments, it's hard for us to forget them, right? Like,
Hmm.
the first time I ever took a drug, it's like, say no to drugs. Because I remember growing up on, the DARE program. It's like, you can't help it. You can't help but think about
Hmm.
some of these common things. So if you create those and say, if your daughter grows up with a few maxims of her own that she has an attachment to, it's super hard to just forget that. So if you
Yeah.
combine that with then all the lessons, that could be a pretty powerful combination.
Hmm.
And I also love, Jen, what you said about making little promises and keeping them. I mean, just as a funny example, I know that I can't go a week without you know eating sweets, right, or eating chocolate, just because I've broken that hundreds of times in the past. So I think whether it's dating or just life in general, that's sound advice.
Yeah. So it looks like we're coming up on 41 minutes. I guess one last kind of thing, if we're going to leave each other with, maybe one lesson, one statement, one thought about dating or what we've learned, what would it be?
For me, I would say take your time. It really, I mean, guys are up against the whole, when are we getting engaged, when are we progressing, when are we moving to that next step. um, my advice would be, don't let that get to you, because I mean, it's one of the bigger decisions you'll make in your life. You got to make sure to choose the right person.
Yeah. Hmm. Adam, I'll let you go and ponder this a little bit longer.
Yeah, no, for me, I think it's pretty simple. I think I'm from my point of view, I'm just such a big believer in criteria and learning and really, double and triple checking what you think. Because again, to all of our points that we've made previously, it's really hard to know what you're thinking when you're also feeling something and you want to feel something and you're attracted to someone. It's ridiculously hard to combat that. But just
Yeah.
like having the maxim or the proverb or having a criteria list, if you have something to map back to, it's a little harder to let yourself off the hook. If there's an answer sheet and you go, it's not there, or I know that this is a lesson that I believe in. So it's like having something, whether it's criteria, having proverbs, having, someone who's holding you accountable and saying, hey, remember 5 years ago, you told me you wanted this, 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 and this. And you told me to let you know if this person wasn't fitting it. Something, you got to have something to map back
A
to.
board of directors.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, something, because even CEOs, right? Exactly. They have people who are overseeing their performance. This is a commonality in every aspect of our culture, whether it's the president can say something and it can be vetoed. We have checks and balances. We just don't do this with ourselves or with, friends or partners in life. So yeah, criteria or something to hold you accountable.
So for me, I think that the biggest takeaway would be that the people that you surround yourself with have the ability to make or break you. If you're with people day in and day out and they're not like-minded, and people can be whoever they want, but you know what you need. You innately know what you need to fill you up. And if you're not getting that feeling, or you're not getting that from the person, definitely, I know a lot of people have a hard time leaving a relationship. So if they were watching this, I would say, and leave. And so then on the other side of it is, like you said, when people show you who they are, believe them. If they're showing you good things and positive things, hold on to those things, grow, with that person. And on the contrary, if they're showing you indicators, even from 21 Jump Street, those are real. They're not going to go away. They're only going to get worse over time. And so just trust your intuition, because you know better than any of your friends do, or any other person, a counselor, how they make you feel.
Yeah.
Well, that would be the best advice.
Well said. Well said.